So a little kid is about 7 years old, sitting at the breakfast table with his parents, eating breakfast in the morning, and the darndest thing about the kid is he's never spoken a word in his entire life. Not a single word in 7 years. But out of the blue, as he's looking down at his cereal bowl, he says, "Cereal's too cold." His parents are stunned. Oh my God, he speaks. They can't believe it. And they run to him and they say to him, "Johnny, you speak. How come you never said anything before?" Johnny says, "Cereal was never too cold before."
Like what you did there. That's what's up.
Welcome in to another edition of TBL News, the pod. That's if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, et al., etc., and the like. Or TBL News, the video pod, if you're watching us over there on tbltv.tv or on YouTube. This familiar face here is familiar to me. Should be familiar to you at home by now. This is Brad Smith. He covers the Glass City Wranglers. The Cardiac Kids just keep finding ways of taking it down to the wire and pulling it out somehow. Brad Smith, TBL News writer, and he writes about the Glass City Wranglers. How you doing tonight, Brad? We're meeting a little later than usual. How you feeling? I keep you up too late?
No, I'm feeling great. Excited for this. And once again, to talk about Glass City's eventful weekend. Once again, coming down to the wire per usual.
Well, coming down to the wire twice. I mean, my goodness, at least sometimes they give you a little bit of a reprieve. You can take a breath, maybe go out with the buddies a couple of times, talk about last week's near loss and miracle victory. But this time, it was just back to back. They're going to send Glass City fans to the hospital. They're going to be lining up at Toledo General before we know it. As you said, it was an eventful weekend, an eventful week 5 for the Glass City Wranglers. That included 2 wins by a total of 3 points. The first one, they did it to those poor folks in Kalamazoo. They work so hard. The gym is wonderful. It's a beautiful venue. The team is really good. The team is like inches away from being in second place, I think, right now. Maybe even in first. They're a really good team, the Kalamazoo Galaxy. Darrington did it to him again, huh, Brad?
He did. He sure did. And after we thought that Ice Darrington may be thawing out last week, he certainly proved us wrong once again on Thursday. In 41 minutes, had 47 points, season high, career high, 6 rebounds, 1 assist, 2 steals, 14 of 27 from the field, including the game winner, which was maybe the most impressive one he's had all season.
It was extraordinary. If anyone didn't see this, and if you're watching on the video pod right now, we're showing the replay of that. And if I can get my hands on this technologically, this will be sort of a weird time warp thing. I'm going to talk about what I'm going to do in the future, but you'll be watching me, whatever. It'll all make sense when you watch the episode on TBL TV. We're going to be playing that clip. As Brad said, if you're listening, an extraordinary shot off of an extraordinary game, 47 points. You mentioned the efficiency. Now, that was something that you had spoken about in several articles leading up to this past weekend of games. He goes 14 of 27. That's pretty darn good. That's a lot of shots. And he made a lot of them. What did you see? Anything different from Darrington in this one compared to the last several games where he has shot the ball with a little less efficacy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, to start, less reliance on the free throws. And there's no problem with taking so many free throws and hitting them at an 85% rate like he's doing this season. Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter is that 2 points are just greater than 1 point. And simple math in the NBA, often you hear 3 is greater than 2, but 2 is greater than 1. And Darrington was having to work harder for those 2 points of the charity stripe than, getting that tough and 1 layup that could result in 3 points. So I was definitely seeing Darrington, score at all 3 levels in this game, from the 3-point line, from inside the arc, and of course at the free throw line. But I also saw really solid play from Anthony Carmen per usual.
Yep.
13 points, 6 rebounds, 1 steal on 6 of 12 shooting from the field in 30 minutes. Once again, continuing to be that number 2 guy behind Darrington. And then Chance Hawkins, who we really haven't spoke about much of this season, had 10 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and 1 steal as their starting small forward. If he continues to develop into that role alongside Darrington, alongside Carmen, I could definitely see Hawkins, making a vast jump in production in the second half of the season.
It's an interesting thing as you read those stats. They don't jump off the page, of course, but particularly a guy like Carmen, it's just like every game he's shooting 50%, 52%. He's grabbing some boards. I should say more than some boards. He's second or third on the team in rebounding, I think, right? And
Yep.
He does what needs to get done to play that support role. And it's like that cheesy, now very outdated term, behind every good, I can hear Ronald Reagan saying it, behind every good man is a better woman. It's pejorative now. Of course, it's 2023. I'm going to get mean phone calls from the one listener. But
we have to be inclusive.
we have to be. I'm trying to reformat this old, outdated phrase into something more inclusive. I haven't got the mind or the spirit to do it at the moment. But how about we do the old Robin and Batman thing, right? Whatever is needed when Batman needs shark repellent, if you're going back to the old Adam West Batman, Robin's got him hooked up. Anthony Carmen, whether he's picking up the slack and doing a lot of the scoring, or whether he's doing his thing where he scores 16 points but is always efficient. Talk to me a little bit about this guy who you like so much. He's on your all TBL roster that we're going to talk about later in this podcast. What do you like so much about Anthony Carmen?
It's just the efficiency for me. I mean, right now he's averaging 17.5 points per game, which doesn't look like a lot through 12 games, but his shooting splits 59.3 from the field, 53.1 from the three-point line, and then 66.2 from the charity stripe. But I will say that we've seen plenty of star players in the TBL struggle from the free throw line, such as Deshaun Munson, who is one of the best players in the league, leading that Potawatomi Fire team. And I feel like Carmen's ability, like you said, just to be reliable, just to always give you that consistent output, and to never have those games where it's like, why do you only have 9 points on, 2 of 12 shooting? Like, what happened?
Right.
You're not going to see that from him. He's the most consistent player on this team, and that's not a knock on Darrington. But when Darrington is scoring 47 points one night and 18 points the next night, it's a little hard to win with that if you don't have a guy like Carmen.
That's a really good way of saying it. It's hard to win like that if you don't have a guy like Carmen, to win consistently at least. I feel like Carmen's the guy who keeps you in the game, and Darrington is the guy who can win it for you.
Exactly.
They're really good tag team partners. So let's separate them, because we're going to talk about the next game. Was it Saturday night, or was that a Sunday game against West Virginia?
It was Saturday night.
That was Saturday.
A little awkward, Thursday, Saturday.
Right, the rare Thursday, Saturday lineup for the Wranglers in Week 5. Of course, it's the last week before All-Star break. We're in All-Star break now. We're on spring break. Nobody's throwing beads at me, though. This is all too familiar. Darrington didn't play. Hadn't seen this one before. It was a curveball. Neither one of us knows exactly why. If we find out why, you listener at home will be the first to find out. But the Wranglers play without Darrington, and it's the same thing. They come down to the wire. They're tied with West Virginia on the road. Great game across the board. And what does Glass City do? I don't want to steal your thunder. You've been covering these guys so closely. Tell the listener at home what happened. Right? What happened in those final seconds?
Yeah, I mean, stop me if you heard this one before. Glass City won on another game winner. 6 of the season, 6-0 in one possession games. How'd they do it without Darrington? Well, they went to Carmen in the clutch. 7 seconds left, pulls up from the three-point line, hits back rim, but Jonathan Brown, amid 2 West Virginia grind defenders, gets the rebound, does a hook shot reminiscent of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, one of the all-time NBA greats, hits nothing but net, and Glass City walks it off 109-107. Watching that live, I was in shock. I was in more shock with that shot than the shot that won San Diego State the Final Four game over UConn. I didn't understand it. Jonathan Brown, he's not a bad player, don't get me wrong, but he hasn't scored more than 8 points all season. Saturday's game was a career high for him. Shot 3 of 6 from the field, none bigger than those 2 points in that shot to win the game.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's not a guy with at least statistical offensive prowess who you think of hitting game-winning shots. But for Glass City, it's like the most peculiar kind of next man up mentality. Next man up is supposed to be when your starting left guard goes out and you need somebody to block in the run game for you. It's not really supposed to be, okay, Darrington's out, someone's going to hit a game-winning buzzer beater tonight. It's really something with this Glass City team. It makes for exciting basketball, but Toledo must be saying to these guys, all right, at some point, guys, can you just win 1 by 20? Can we see garbage time for once? And that's something I want you to talk about just a little bit. I don't want to push this topic too much because I want to get into it more next week after All-Star with you. But can Glass City keep winning and keep pace with a team like Kokomo? Such a consistent team like Kokomo, when it's like every single game for Glass City, as you said, is coming down to that one possession, that one shot. Is the ball going to start bouncing the wrong way for them? Or do you think now that they've got the pieces in place, the understanding with how everybody plays together, that after the All-Star break, we might seeing some Wranglers wins that aren't sending people to the hospital?
It's a tough question for sure. But I think that Glass City has the pieces in place to beat a team like Kokomo, to beat a team like Albany in the playoffs or Shreveport. But I think the biggest issue with them is just the reliance on Darrington, like we talked about in last week's episode. And we were worried amid that 2-game losing streak. As you said, the best way to get on a win streak is to just start winning again. And that's what they did, albeit by 3 points in 2 games. And I give them credit. Give credit where credit's due. Those were 2 tough teams, better than their records are. But Glass City, they've lost by an average of 7.7 points per game against Kokomo. So you're not going to be able to have that game-winning 3 that's going to put you over the top, especially if Kokomo is holding you under 100 points like they did in the third and final game between the two. I also think another big issue, they're 6-0 in one-possession games. And while they have the quote-unquote clutch gene, they're a few inches, a few seconds away from being one of the worst teams in the upper Midwest. And it's like, and come playoff time, if Darrington is off by a couple inches, your season's over. And I don't want to sound negative with this topic, but Glass City, they have to get out the quicker starts. And that's something that we saw against the Grind, especially. The first half ended, it was like a 2-point game. And it's like you need a bigger cushion if you're going to let teams come back in the third and fourth quarter, because that's something that Glass City has struggled to do, close opponents out late in the game.
As you mentioned that, and as you mentioned the West Virginia Grind, boy, it brings to mind a game from week 4 where they had the Grind dead to rights, down 32, right? Couldn't close them out. They eventually won. But once again, in overtime, in somewhat cardiac fashion. So I'm gonna hit you with this, Brad. I'm gonna hit you with my own little assessment. I'm not just gonna ask the questions over here. I'm gonna give you a thought of mine. I think that this last game against West Virginia portends good things for Glass City as we look beyond the All-Star break. Most importantly, it points to something that you cited the last time we spoke: hitting the glass. Glass City got to hit the glass. So I think we exchanged messages about this picture shared on Instagram from the higher ups at Glass City. Thank you very much. Yes, we have executives sliding into our DMs at TBL News. They hit the glass pretty hard against West Virginia. Darrington wasn't in there. I don't know if they had, I can't remember if they had a double-digit rebounder, but it just seemed like everyone was a rebound or two above their average. It seemed like they said, all right, Chris isn't here. We got to do something to pick up some of this slack. If we don't have somebody else who's going to score 40 points, well, we better rebound. And heck, if that mentality can be transposed onto games when they do have Darrington, now you're talking about a dangerous proposition if you're an opponent. Because you have a team that now understands we got to hit the glass, and you got a killer like Darrington, and you got a reliable guy like Carmen. I think they start to get really good. That's going to be up to the coaching staff really to implement that and remind them, guys, if you rebound like you did without Chris, and you support Chris the way you often do on the offensive end when we do have him, we're going to get to crunch time in the playoffs. They're going to be close games. That's how playoff games go. And then we have the edge because we know how to win those close games. So I like the position your Wranglers are in. We're going to move on for a second from the Wranglers. We're going to talk about a team that doesn't exist. We're talking a fake team. All right, listener at home, we're done with the Wranglers. We're doing something fun. It's All-Star Week. Again, it's spring break. Still, Brad, no beats. No one's throwing me any beats. I'm feeling hurt here. You and Owen and Jack, that's Owen Whetstone, sometimes called Owen Whetstone when I want to irritate him, and Jack Morgan, TBL news writers, put together a really, really cool piece. Go over to tblnews.co. See, I think I'm saying today, leave off the last M for my oh my. It's All-Star Week in Lehigh, where you guys drafted your ultimate starting five. Let's start with the first pick. You magnanimously gave up the first pick, giving it to Owen, and he stabbed you in the back. He took your boy Darrington. Darrington goes off the board first to Owen. Second, Jack takes the dynamic scorer in Gulf Coast, Terrell Wilson. Brad, who'd you take with that third pick in the draft there?
Yeah, so, I mean, as you said earlier, Darrington, my boy, was taken by Owen. No remorse, but still a little hard feelings with that. Mm-hmm. Wilson was gone. I liked him a lot there at 3, but I decided to take one of Owen's guys in Derek Hawthorne of the Kokomo Bobcats. And my original thought process was he's just one of the best players in the TBL. A lot of talent, great two-way player, 3-level scorer. And his best trait that really doesn't go along with people is his ability to defend. In those 2 games that Gillespie played against Kokomo, where Kokomo swept them by 17 combined points, Darrington had just 54 points, which just 54,
right.
Gotta take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, that should be one game.
He only shot 37.5% from the field and 23.5% from downtown. I love that defensive upside. I love the offensive upside and the leadership from Hawthorne, and I just think he's a great pick at number 3.
Yeah, I agree. Both Kokomo fans and Wranglers fans all across Indiana and Toledo, Ohio, are covering their ears. Owen betraying his Kokomo Bobcats by taking Darrington, and now you have to do the unthinkable and take Hawthorne with your top pick. I think it makes a lot of sense, though. But it kind of threw a wrench into the works for you because you had this notion of a team that's built around Darrington, and now you got to adjust. You adjust in an interesting, somewhat predictable way. I'm going to be honest. You take Anthony Carmen with your first pick in the second round. You're taking the complimentary guy. You're not going with some big stat-stuffing stud. Tell us why.
Yeah, I mean, with a guy like Hawthorne, he has a very different play style than Darrington or Terrell Wilson or Cameron Mitchell, as we'll get into later. But his ability to serve as that number 1 guy on a team, the best player on a championship level team, that gives room for a guy like Carmen, who just fits well in any type of offense, any type of scheme, and we've seen that all season long. As I mentioned earlier, the efficient shooting splits, that's the biggest selling point for me with Carmen, but his ability to rebound as well, as we'll see with my draft. I didn't go heavy on the bigs. I went very small ball. And with a guy like Carmen who can average 4.8 rebounds per game, notch sometimes 6 or 7 a game, that's going to be really crucial come the playoffs. And just, in the entire season, having a guy that can crash the glass like Carmen.
So you mentioned crashing the glass. Round 3 is where all 3 of you guys decided to crash the glass a little bit. Owen takes Orlando Little Jr. From Kalamazoo. He's their small forward, power forward, or combo forward. Now his stats don't jump out at you, but Owen went to Michigan State. He's over there in Lansing, and he's bouncing around a lot of these games, and he's seen Kalamazoo play a lot. So he's going with the eye test. Kind of like you with Carmen. I think statistically you see some things you like a lot from Carmen, of course, but for the most part, Carmen matches the eye test for you. He's a good complementary guard. He's a good piece on a good team. Jack goes with Purcell Washington, the league's leading rebounder. You got yourself a heck of a rebounder, too. A little bit out of left field, though, when you talk about position, considering you already have 2 guards on the team. You took Deshaun Munson. Walk us through this interesting pick.
Yeah. And the reason why I took Deshaun Munson is because, to be honest with you, Purcell Washington was my pick. And he's been an excellent rebounder, and he's been a great offensive rebounder too, which that's something that I've really cherished more while covering Glass City, a team that averages 9 offensive rebounds a game, literally the 7th worst in the TBL. So a guy like Munson, obviously he can't play any of the forward spots at 6'4", but he's still averaging 12.9 rebounds per game.
It's absurd.
Along with 20 points per game and 7.7 rebounds assists per game. So Munson, he's like this Russell Westbrook type guy. Not the Russell Westbrook that we know and hate today, but the Russell Westbrook back in OKC. Munson, awesome player, can be the number 1 guy on a team that's going to go to the championship. So having him and Hawthorne, that's an excellent 1-2 punch along with Carmen. And even if it is a small lineup, we've seen those work in the TBL before. Example A, Glass City, albeit by 6 one-possession wins. But, I mean, if your best big man is Darnell Rushton or Jonathan Brown, if you have a guy like Darrington, you're good.
So I'm going to combine the next 2 rounds. One of the reasons I'm doing that is because they really speak to the direction that you take your team in, which is you buy into the fact that, a couple of the guys who I really wanted were taken off the board. I don't get this more traditional looking team. I got to do something untraditional here. So you take Fudge Moore. Oh, God, I get hungry every time I say his name. Fudge Moore from those Kokomo Bobcats who cause your Wranglers so much trouble. Another guy's stats aren't necessarily going to jump out at you. A glue guy, likable player too. And in round 5, you're rounding it out with the reigning defensive player of the year, Lyle Hexum from Potawatomi, who's just playing a different style of basketball this year. I spoke to Chris Cox, the voice of the Fire, a couple of times, and we talked about Lyle Hexum and why did his statistics look so different from last year. And he said, look, he doesn't have to do everything for this team. And it's something when we spoke with Lyle in the preseason, he mentioned that very same thing. I don't have to do as much as I did with Enid on Potawatomi, so I'm not going to. I get to cruise on the perimeter a little bit more because we got the interior guys in Potawatomi, so the stats aren't jumping off the page for Lyle Hexum like they were last year, particularly the defensive stats. That said, he's the defending defensive player of the year. That means he plays good defense. He averaged double-digit rebounds last year. That means he can rebound. He averaged over 20 points a game last year, meaning he can score. All of those numbers are down, but the guy still has the ability. So talk to me about Fudge Moore and Lyle Hexum rounding out your ultimate TBL starting 5.
Yeah, I'll start with Hexum to kind of go off of your points. Obviously, like you said, not averaging the gaudy stat line that he was last season with Enid, but he's still one of the best players in the league, still one of the front runners for the DPOY, and his change of play style this year in Potawatomi, it's certainly showing on the stat line. This year, shooting 43% from the field, shooting 38.3% from three-point range, which is the second highest mark on the team. Better than Munson, better than Kyle Guy, better than all of those other guys on 7.6 attempts per game from downtown. From a guy that's 6'7", 260 pounds, that's unheard of, even in today's standards of the NBA and or TBL. You just don't have guys that are that big that can be a dominant force in the paint that can also shoot the ball out, 25 feet out from the rim. And I just think that's very valuable. I think getting him with the last pick in the draft, I think that's crazy value.
Crazy value.
It's a need, especially with my team. So, I mean, it was it was a great pick. And with the second to last pick, I had Fudge Moore, and it was a questionable pick, I'll say, because that's the fourth guard I've taken. And
don't take any offense, Fudge. This is fantasy basketball. It's all in good fun.
Of course. And Fudge, you're a stud of a player. Absolute great two-way player, and he has such a low reliance on three-pointers that you can use him on those backdoor cuts, and you can use him under the paint. Even though he is, kind of small, 6'4", 180, he's still scrappy. He's still a great defender, averaging 1.2 steals per game, shooting 43.9% from the field, has a great collection of dribbling moves and combos. He does very well in Hawthorne's shadow, similar to how Carmen does in Darrington. And I just think having those two behind Munson and Hawthorne, I think that's, really solid, because most defenses, when playing my team, they're going to focus on star guys. They're going to focus on Munson. They're going to double team Hawthorne on the perimeter. And that's going to leave guys like Fudge Moore and Anthony Carmen open for those good open looks that, can possibly swing the game's outcome.
Coach Zamora in Glass City, Toledo, Ohio. Coach Zamora calling Coach Zamora. If you're listening, if you're watching, there's a young man named Brad Smith here who's going to reverse the typical trajectory of pundits and coaches. He's going to be a pundit, and then he's going to become a coach, not the other way around. I love your thinking there, Brad. Bringing in Fudge Moore for the backdoor cuts. You're getting Pete Carrill fundamental on me here. You're really thinking through the strategy of it, and I love it, man. It sounds like it was a fun thing for you to do. You got artistic with it.
It was, yeah. And I mean, obviously going the traditional route of a lineup, that it's fun up to an extent. And that's what Owen and Jack did. And their drafts turned out great, as I'm sure you'll talk to them about it later this week. But it's just running an unorthodox lineup like I did. It just opens up a lot of different possibilities for the scoring. And that's something we've seen in the NBA too. Back in the 90s, the league, the NBA ran through the big men.
Yep.
Hakeem Olajuwon.
Patrick Ewing, baby.
All those great guys. Ewing, your guy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was such a huge trend. And in the NBA, we've seen it a little more this year. Nikola Jokic, Giannis, Joel Embiid, etc. But we've also seen teams that can win with, the small ball lineups. We saw the Golden State Warriors dynasty, where it was Curry, Clay, Kevin Durant, Iguodala, and then Andrew Bogut. That team dominated, ran past LeBron James in the finals, became one of the best dynasties in the NBA. So I have a feeling that this team, if put together, possibly in real life, talking to you guys, TBL, Munson, Carmen, Moore, Hawthorne, and Hexum, I think could form a very scary starting five.
Yeah, it's kind of a deal where they're saying, come out and guard us. We're going to shoot from the three-point line. We'll trade 3 for 2 all day long. And if you do come out and guard us, we've got the guys like Carmen and Moore who know how to take advantage of you big guys with the slow feet cutting towards the basket. I think it's really clever, Brad. Look, the world should know. I think Brad spearheaded this whole idea. Brad, I thank you for doing it. It's been a lot of fun watching the three of you, very smart, very savvy sports writers, explore this space, bring some TBL players to life, put them on a page, give us our stats that we love so well, and they talk about their tendencies too, and build teams that bedazzle the imagination. Brad, thank you very much. Thank you for being on. Thank you for being such a good sport, such a valuable member of the team. And those Wranglers of yours, one of these days, I'm telling you, one of these days, they're going to give you a nice, easy article to write. You're going to say, this one was over in the first half and I went to bed, sayonara.
Oh boy, I hope so. But Chris Darrington, if you're out there listening, once again, I'm sorry for not taking you number 1 overall. I wish I could have. You're my guy. But you will see TBL News has made a 1-minute clip of Darrington's game winner against Kalamazoo. Very excellent edit. Can't say it was all me. Nick did help with some of it. So, I mean, it was a great team effort, and I hope you enjoy that.
I did color correction, which is to say I slid once for the San Diego filter, or maybe it was a Los Angeles filter, but either way, you look very West Coast. Ready for Hollywood. Hollywood Darrington, we'll start calling him. Brad, again, thanks so much, man. Always a pleasure sitting down with you. Always a pleasure talking to you. And always a pleasure reading your articles over there on tblnews.co. Leave off the last M for more. Brad Smith with us here at TBL News, and here I am, signing off from the TBL News Desk by saying, from the TBL News Desk, signing off. Did I miss the national championship?
No, it happens at 8 Central, 9.